Before we dive any deeper into JavaScript, we need to go over a couple of programming principles that are extremely important when it comes to software development and using a programming language effectively in solving hard problems. For that, we're going to begin with separation of concerns. Now, if we read the definition right here off of Wikipedia, we see that in computer science, the separation of concerns is a design principle for separating a computer program into distinct sections so that each section addresses a separate concern. And then a concern is a set of information that affects the code of a computer program. Now that is a pretty generic definition and kind of hard to interpret, especially for beginning software developers. And in reality, it's so generic that it really doesn't tell us what separation of concern is. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this down in order to better understand what is meant by separation of concerns as it applies directly to programming and software engineering. So I'm going to take this blank screen and let's go ahead and talk about this. So we've got separation of concerns, SOC. You'll see it in both ways right here. You'll hear people refer to SOC or to separation of concerns. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply separation of concerns to what we've done so far in web development. So we're talking about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we're going to take that and apply it to this principle of separation of concerns. To start out with, when we first learned HTML and then we learned about CSS, the first thing we learned was actually a combination of concerns. And what I mean by that is, let's go ahead and illustrate it really quick. So here we've got, originally, we learned HTML. And inside of our HTML, we learned that HTML has to do with the structure of a document. So let's go ahead and put that down, structure. So the structure of our document is what HTML defines. And inside of that, we also learned how to do something called inline styling. When we did inline styling, it looked something like this. When we had an HTML tag, so let's say we have a div, we use the style attribute on that tag, and in here is where we did some kind of styling, or we put in our style information. And so this was inline styling. Now, the reason why I said when we first learned HTML, we actually combined concerns. And what I mean by that is that when we're doing HTML, we knew that that had to do with structure. In other words, the structure of a document, how that document is formatted and created, and how all of the HTML tags built that structural hierarchy of the tags living inside of other tags with the parent and children tags. And if you need a refresher on that, please go watch the videos on HTML in order to better understand how HTML has to do with structure. The other thing we have here is styling. And styling, we know, has to do with the look and feel of a web page once it is displayed in the browser. Now, look and feel is something completely different than structure. Structure is how something is built. So when we look at a building, we can see the look and feel, or the facade of a building, what it looks like to the eye. But the structure that lives underneath that facade that helps hold that building together, that would be the structure we're talking about. HTML is the body of the building or the structure, and then styling or CSS is actually the look and feel. So what we've got going on here is we actually have a mix of concerns where our styling information is actually combined with the structure. And what this is a mixture of concerns, right? We've got both our structure and our inline style. And what they do for us is they merge the two features or concerns. And that's where we start to talk about concerns. What are concerns? Well, concerns are those two different issues that we're trying to address with the software that we're building and the different components within that software. And in this instance, when we're talking about HTML and CSS, HTML is in charge of structure, CSS is in charge of the look and feel. So we've got two different concerns. We've got structure and we've got look and feel. And when we first learned HTML, we mixed the two together by using this inline style tag right here. Now, why is this a problem? You may be asking yourself, well, I mean, we do this all the time. We mix everything. If we use a Word document, we've got color, we've got font size, we've got all of that stuff mixed into that Word document. Well, in word processing, that's not really a big deal, except for the fact that if you've ever gone in to change a 1,000-page Word document and you want to change the look and feel of specific sections of that document and you want all sections of that type to be the same, you actually end up going page by page through that 1,000-page document trying to make sure that those styles get updated and changed correctly. And in Microsoft Word, you can do that using the header and the body and all those styles. So it really is separated, although it's all within a Word document. Well, in HTML, you can imagine that if we had several hundred HTML pages inside of a website, and all of those pages had a specific look and feel that was common across all those pages, yet in every single one of our pages, we would have to go update every single style for every single element in that page, we would be spending huge amounts of time and effort trying to restyle each HTML page in order to change its look and feel. In other words, if the marketing department decided that the branding for the entire website had changed, and that is colors, fonts, layout, all that kind of stuff, it would be a massive task to go through and update every single HTML file just to go change the styling that makes the look and feel. So in order to separate those concerns in an attempt to make maintenance of our pages easier, what we have done for our separation of concerns, so let's put that back up here, separation of concern, is in web development, we took the structure, which was HTML, and then we took styling, which is CSS, and we took that out into its own file. And then to extend that even further, instead of having JavaScript inside of every single one of our HTML files, which would also be a problem, what we've done is we've separated out these concerns into these different aspects or these different concerns that we have. We've got HTML and HTML deals specifically with the structure of each HTML document. And then we created style sheets, and the style sheets, or CSS, they have to deal with the look and feel of our websites. And then we created, which are just regular JavaScript files or JS files. And those JavaScript files have to do with interactivity within our pages. Right? Interactivity. So now, because we have these different items separated out, if we ever need to change the look and feel of a website, we simply go to our external style sheet, and then we can modify the look and feel of all of our HTML documents. Instead of editing all 100 HTML documents, we can go and edit 1, 2, or maybe 3 style sheets in order to get the effect that we need. And instead of modifying 100 different HTML files to modify the interactivity within our web pages, and by interactivity I mean every time somebody clicks on a DOM element or clicks on an HTML element, instead of needing to go update that JavaScript across 100 plus HTML files, instead we can change the activity of our website simply by modifying the JavaScript files. And it might be one, it might be many different JavaScript files, but probably less than 100 plus independent HTML files, we can update all of that activity or interactivity inside of these JavaScript files. So what we've done is we've separated these three very specific concerns, which is structure, look and feel, and interactivity, into separate files that now allow us to modify our website in any way that we need to with one of those concerns specifically. We can go ahead and we can do all modifications to our website. And all we have to do is decide, does the modification that we're currently working on, does it have to do with structure? Does it have to do with the look and feel? Or does it have to do with interactivity? Instead of modifying 100 plus HTML files, we can go in and modify just the HTML for the structure of a document if we find something that we need to modify. If it has to do with the look and feel, we can just go modify style sheets and it will affect all HTML files. And if it has to do with interactivity, pulling content or pushing content to and from the website to a back-end system, then we can just modify just the JavaScript files and it will still impact the entire website and all of the HTML files. So this is separation of concerns. Really, we're just identifying what our concerns are within the software that we are developing, and then using the appropriate technology, in this case JavaScript, styles, and HTML, in order to separate that concern out so that that concern can be easily addressed without negatively impacting any other concern. And we see that when we change the look and feel by modifying the CSS, we don't impact the structure of the HTML files, which means we don't introduce defects or bugs into the structure of our HTML documents because we're not touching them. In other words, it reduces the amount of code we're touching and reduces the amount of bugs or defects we may introduce into our web applications. And if we want to change interactivity, we are not changing the style sheets, nor are we changing the HTML structure. We're only changing that JavaScript, which means when we go to redeploy our web application, we just need to test the JavaScript. We don't need to test the style sheets because they haven't changed. We don't need to test the HTML because it hasn't changed. We just need to change what we modified. If we combined all of these concerns together into just the HTML page, then we would have to test every single HTML page across the entire web application to make sure that any changes we made in the structure, the look and feel, or the interactivity hasn't negatively impacted one of those pages. And right there, this increases our ability to take care of our web applications, reduces the amount of time it takes to maintain it, and also reduces complexity in that when we have a modification, we just have to determine the type of modification or what concern it impacts, and then go to only those files where that type of concern is addressed, modify those, test it, deploy. So hopefully this helps you understand the separation of concerns principle and how it applies to software development, specifically how it applies to web development.